What do you think of when you hear the words hell on earth? Do you think of a specific climate? Maybe a location on the planet that you'd never want to be caught enduring, like trekking across the Sahara or braving a cataclysmic volcanic eruption? Or maybe this location is something made at the hands of man, something that preys on our deepest fears and insecurities, somewhere that is absolutely inescapable by design. Would you believe me if I told you that place was a prison? ADX Florence Supermax Prison is home to the worst people society has to offer, including serial bombers like Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the perpetrator of the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. And at the center of all of these people lay one man who had already escaped his sentence twice before, the legendary El Chapo.
Rob, this is an uphill battle for El Chapo, but the man nicknamed Shorty tonight is in a do-or-die situation.
His 30-year reign over the Sinaloa cartel saw him amass not only monetary riches, but fortunes in both political pull and firepower. At its peak, Sinaloa was bringing in over $36 billion a year, with Joaquin Guzman reportedly raking in a personal billion annually. It's afforded him a lavish lifestyle, one that he flaunted openly. He had a fondness for fast guns, faster cars, and the fastest aircraft money could buy. He built himself a personal army that rivaled the likes of even the Mexican government. But of course, with all that money, one has to worry about others who might be a little envious of that success. On May 24, 1993, the Arellano family, heads of the Tijuana cartel, and Guzman's main business rivals at the time, botched the attempt to assassinate El Chapo at Guadalajara International Airport and instead murdered Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo. This collateral execution sparked an enormous public outcry and a subsequent crackdown on the drug trades that bloomed out of the corpse of Felix Gallardo's Guadalajara cartel. Chapo fled to Guatemala, tipping a border patrol guard $1.2 million to allow him safe passage. Unfortunately, this very patrol guard gave up the man's location in return for the $5 million bounty placed on his head, and he was given his first taste of life behind bars at Puente Grande in Jalisco.
Fingerprinted, giving a blood sample, standing for a mugshot, signing documents, and being questioned.
Puente Grande should have been a hellscape in its own right for the drug lord, given its status as a maximum security prison. Felix Gallardo himself was an inmate here when Guzman first arrived in 1995, and his cartel had disintegrated since his internment. With Sinaloa, it was a much different story. Associates of El Chapo would enter the building with large sums of cash and briefcases and bribe the prison guards into allowing their jefe the freedoms to continue running his business. He was allowed to make regular phone calls to his lieutenants to receive operation reports and to give orders that expanded the cartel's trafficking routes in all directions. These illicit installments given to the guards also gave the man free reign over the prison. Wherever he wanted to go, whatever he wanted to do, whoever he wanted to see, the luxuries afforded to him became more extensive than most hotels might offer. He threw parties for the inmates. He was smuggled in entertainment in various forms. He was allowed special visitation from women. It was this unfettered freedom that afforded him the opportunity to build relationships with those who would become indispensable to his future business ventures. Within the walls of his prison fortress, he met his second wife, Zulema Hernandez, who was serving a 10-year robbery charge. He also became close friends with one of the senior corrections officers, Damaso Lopez Nunez, and he helped orchestrate what would be his first escape from prison. In the time since his incarceration, the United States were working tirelessly to get him extradited to their jurisdiction so that he could be charged with international substance trafficking crimes. Given what he knew about America's penal system, he knew it would spell the end of his empire if their wishes were ever granted. He needed to ensure that never came to be. Just a month before his escape, Lopez Nunez resigned from his post at Puente Grande, and many prison employees had begun to embellish their spending habits. Even lowly prison workers like janitors. People like Francisco Camberos Rivera, who was a prison attendant responsible for the inmates' laundry. On January 19, 2001, Camberos Rivera opened the door to Guzman's cell and hid him within a laundry cart. Other bribed guards had disabled the security system in that section of the prison, and no evidence of the escape ever came to light. He was wheeled out the back of the prison and stuffed into the trunk of Rivera's Monte Carlo, far away from the place he called home for the last 7 years. Guzman remained at large for almost 13 years, and in the time between his new wife Zulema, Hernandez had assisted him in expanding his operation northward into Mexico City. Damaso Lopez Nunez was now an enforcer for Sinaloa, and in time, he was given operational control over the southwestern region of Baja California Sur after the dissolution of the Tijuana cartel. As Sinaloa's influence expanded all across Mexico, so too did El Chapo's. Though he was incredibly elusive, this was mainly due to the fact that he had bribed officials within multiple levels of the Mexican government. His headstrong attitude and defiant expressions of his power often saw him walking into restaurants with a group of sicarios, collecting everybody's phones, dining in the establishment with his muscle, and returning everyone's property before paying for the tab of the entire room. Local police were bribed to look the other way. Government officials were bribed to ignore the claims from the civilian population. Enforcement agencies were fed information on his rivals to weaken their influence on the regions he currently eyed. This practice is ultimately what started the Beltran-Leyva feud in 2008, after Alfredo Beltran-Leyva was handed into the DEA on an alleged tip by Guzman himself. He pushed the pieces on the board of his silent influence with bottomless wells of cash, dedicated informants, and extensive counterintelligence measures. But as his economic footprint grew, international agencies cooperated more and more on his eventual recapture. On February 22, 2014, a joint task force of the Mexican Navy, the DEA, and U.S. Marshals traced the BlackBerry signal of Guzman's head bodyguard, Carlos Manuel "Hu" Ramirez, to the Hotel Miramar in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, and took the drug kingpin from his family without firing a single shot. He was immediately transferred to the only supermax prison in Mexico, Altiplano, and placed under constant surveillance. The liberties he had paid for in Puente Grande were nowhere to be found here. His bathroom shower only operated in the early morning hours for a brief period of time. He was subject to frequent cell checks and pat-downs, required to keep his head shaved so as to avoid hiding makeshift weaponry within it. Personnel were held to a much higher standard due to this constant supervision, and for the first time, Sinaloa's jefe had to cope with the fact that he couldn't get his way, at least for now. He spent a year within this isolated cell before suddenly, on July 11, 2015, surveillance footage saw him ducking behind his shower partition, never to be seen again.
Late last night, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman broke out of a maximum security prison about 60 miles from Mexico City.
The cell was checked shortly after, and corrections officers were stunned to find out that a 30-foot hole had been dug through the shower tiles, connecting to a nearly mile-long tunnel built in the same exact specifications as the smuggling channels the Sinaloa cartel used between borders. Most astonishingly, a rail cart motorcycle was found connected from end to end, and it was believed that Guzman rode this vehicle to another 30-foot ladder that expelled him into a nearby construction site to freedom once more. Many people couldn't believe that the man had escaped from this prison, previously touted to be impenetrable, in such a ridiculous manner. It came to light that associates of Guzman had bribed officials from the deepest level of government in order to facilitate this escape, even a pair of employees from Mexico's equivalent to the CIA, CNI. This was the final straw for the U.S., who on 2 occasions now had tried to collect the man for crimes against their country, only to see him slip through the fingers of those who held him. For another 11 months, El Chapo hid himself away from the prying eyes of international interest. The Mexican government, seeking to save face and dismiss conspiracy charges, and the U.S., seeking a sense of finality to the near 20 years of floundering, worked together with Colombian authorities that had previously spearheaded the operation to take down Pablo Escobar. Dubbed Operation Black Swan, a final push was enacted on January 8, 2016. 17 Marines from the Mexican Special Forces raided a known stronghold of Guzman's in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. 5 gunmen were killed and 6 wounded and arrested. El Chapo escaped through a secret tunnel but was collected nearly 20 kilometers away by police. The threat of extradition loomed ever heavier, and Chapo did everything he could to avoid this ultimate sentence. On October 17, 2016, Vicente Antonio Bermudez Zicarias, the federal judge involved in his extradition proceedings, was assassinated while on his morning jog. His lawyers attempted to hold him in Mexico as well by demanding guarantees to El Chapo's well-being, such as forbiddance of the death penalty. All of this proved fruitless though, and on January 19, 2017, Sinaloa's Jefe was extradited to the United States, facing charges of substance trafficking, kidnapping, and murder in 7 U.S. states. He was found guilty of all counts in February of the following year and sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, while ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion. He was sent to ADX Florence in Colorado, the most secure prison in the United States, the place where monsters go to die. The conditions at this Supermax facility made Altiplano out to be a walk in the park, with a high inmate-to-staff ratio and kept under constant 24-hour surveillance through the eyes of each other and the lenses of the sophisticated surveillance systems covering every square inch of the grounds. Each cell is made of solid concrete, with a desk and stool molded into the floor and walls. A simple toilet and thin cot, held 2 feet off the ground by a concrete bed frame, are all the amenities they have within the walls. Each prisoner spends 23 hours a day within their cell, given only an hour for exercise or to be showered down with a high-pressure hose. No visitation, no fraternization, no deviation. Guzman has written letters in his time there to his third wife, Emma Coronel Asporo, who has repeatedly reached out to officials, claiming that the man has fallen into a deep bout of depression over the draconian practices of the facility. He is treated with no respect, no right to privacy, no right to autonomy, no right to liberty.
Say, for instance, from an inmate wanting to come in, go across the inner perimeter fence and touch that lethal death fence, it would be fatal to that inmate.
In 2022, Alfredo Beltran Leyva, the man Guzman allegedly gave up to the DEA in the early 2000s, was transferred to ADX Florence. Who's to say, given the bleak living conditions, that Guzman would wish this on even his worst enemy, let alone a man who was simply collaborating on trafficking channels with another cartel. Guzman used every resource at his disposal to avoid the very fate he was dealt. In the end, coming full circle and sharing the same outcome he condemned one of his own to suffer.